Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of ITC India conference for giving me this opportunity to share my thought with the audience. Since this is an academic research track, I assume that most of the audience are from academia. So I structured this talk mostly aligned towards academic research. As the title of the talk suggests, this talk will cover some of the aspects of secure hardware design. Let me tell you, hardware IP protection is one of the most active research areas in the domain of hardware security. In the recent years, there have been a tremendous growth in research in this area all over the world, both in academia as well as in industry. Logic logging is the most popular and widely adopted design for security solution that attempts to address several key security challenges. In this talk, I will try to present a brief insight of various logic logging techniques, their merits and demerits, which might help you to grow some interest to solve some of the open research problems in the domain of hardware security. And as I mentioned, several industrial organizations are actively working on various design for security solutions such as logic locking, hardware watermarking, etc. So we are not far away from a commercial solution for hardware IP protection. Modern days integrated circuits are comprised of a wide range of functional modules such as digital, analog, radio frequency, etc. These different functional modules are called IP cores, which are provided by different third-party IP vendors which are located worldwide. These IP are available in various forms such as soft IP, which is nothing but the RTL label, firm IP, that is nothing but the gate level netlist, and as well as hard IP, that is layout level design. A system integrator buys these third-party IPs from different vendors according to the requirement of the system specification and integrates them into a single chip. This trend of IP procurement from global distributor not only eases the development process but also reduces the cost and design turnaround time of the complex chips. Manufacturing these complex chips also requires advanced mixed technology fabrication facilities. However, the skyrocketing cost of setting up and maintaining advanced fabrication facilities forces many design houses to operate fabless. For example, companies like Apple, they operate fabless. These fabless companies have to depend on the offshore foundries for the fabrication of their chips. Not only that, recently test, assembly and packaging services are also outsourced to OSAT companies such as ASE, MCOR, etc. While the involvement of multiple third-party companies into the development process of a single chip ensures better technology at a lower price, it automatically raises the question of authenticity and trustworthiness of these third-party elements. The involvement of untrustworthy personnel in any phase of the design cycle may result in several security vulnerabilities such as IP piracy, illegal overproduction, counterfeiting, reverse engineering, as well as insertion of the hardware trojan. So let us have a look into each of these things. So any illegal unlicensed use of someone's IP without acknowledging the designer is called IP piracy. Since the IP cores are available in the form of either Verilog code or GDS2 file, a rogue employee in the design team can easily copy the IP of a module and claim its ownership. A rogue foundry can also illegally overproduce the ICs from the same set of mask. The foundry neither has to bear the design cost nor has to prepare a new set of mask. Therefore, these rogue fab labs can overproduce these extra ICs at a minimal cost. They can sell these extra ICs illegally at a lower price compared to the original IC company. A discarded IC may have several elements which are still functionally correct. IC counterfeiting is a practice of assembling recycled component from discarded IC which very much look like a genuine IC. As per various reports, more than 5% commercial ICs are counterfeit IC. Counterfeit ICs poses serious reliability and security concerns for the semiconductor industry. IP piracy and counterfeit IC cost semiconductor industry a loss of several billions of dollars every year. Reverse engineering is a process of extracting gate level netlist from the GDS2 file. Different steps of reverse engineering consist of depackaging the IC, delayering and imaging individual layers and analyzing the collected images. Various companies provide commercial reverse engineering solutions. Now let's see what is insertion of hardware trojan. With the knowledge of gate level netlist, an untrusted foundry can insert hardware trojan in still the location inside the circuit. Minimal footprints and rare activation make it extremely difficult to detect the hardware trojan using regular testing procedure. Apart from causing circuit malfunctions, this hardware trojan can leak secret information of the chips when it gets activated. So as a countermeasure, design for security has emerged to be a contingent part of the VLSI design cycle. Existing IP protection strategies can be categorized as either active methods or passive methods. Passive methods are used to detect IP piracy. Watermarking and fingerprinting are popular passive methods for IP protection. On the other hand, active methods like IC camouflaging, split manufacturing, and logic encryption can prevent IP piracy. IC camouflaging is a layout level protection scheme that primarily thwarts reverse engineering attacks, assuming the foundry to be the trusted entity. It creates layout of the different logic gates in such a way that the reverse engineering tools cannot differentiate them, although they are functionally different. While IC camouflaging assumes the third-party foundries to be a trusted entity, split manufacturing offers protection against malicious fab labs. The fundamental concept of split manufacturing is to prevent the extraction of design functionality by the untrusted foundry by splitting the design into multiple parts and fabricating individual parts from separate foundries. While split manufacturing and IC camouflaging offers protection against only either untrustworthy foundry or end users, logic encryption can thwart piracy anywhere in the design flow except the design house, which is assumed to be the trusted entity. In a logic log netlist, the designer inserts additional logic elements into the circuit design to conceal its functionality from the attackers. An encrypted design functions correctly only under the specific constraint inputs, which is a designer secret. Logic encryption can be either combinational or sequential. While combinational logic encryption relies on obfuscating the gate level netlist of the design, sequential logic obfuscation offers protection at a higher abstraction level, that is RTL level. So in this talk, I will be discussing some of the combinational as well as sequential logic encryption techniques. So this is the basic flow of logic encryption. After logic synthesis, the designer inserts some extra logic elements to lock the functionality of the design. This locked design is sent to the potentially untrustworthy third-party foundry for fabrication. Finally, the locked IC returns back to the design house. The designer activates the IC using the correct key before the shipment. However, the secret activation key has been subject to various attacks. The attacker can be any rogue entity in the supply chain post design house. Either they can be from third-party foundry or an end user with the access to the advanced reverse engineering tool. For extracting the values of the key inputs, the attackers requires the following resources. The first one is a functional IC which has been activated by the designer using the correct key. The attacker can obtain this IC from a market or through any spurious means. The attacker uses this IC as a black box to get the golden oracle, that is input-output pairs. The attacker also requires a locked gate level netlist where the attacker have the knowledge of the logic encryption scheme and the location of the key gates. However, the key input is unknown to the attacker. So such a netlist can be obtained from the GDS2 file in case the attacker is from untrusted foundry, or the attacker can also reverse engineer the target IC to get the gate level netlist. So over the years, it's been a never-ending war between the attacks and the countermeasures. The state-of-the-art logic encryption techniques can be categorized as either pre-SAT attack era or post-SAT attack era. While in pre-SAT attack era, the focus has been on mitigating the attacks which exploit weak key gate positions, the focus completely shifted towards mitigating the SAT attack in the post-SAT attack era. Path sensitization, hill climbing, and logic code-based attacks are few attacks which exploit weak key gate locations. Using path sensitization attack, a key gate can be sensitized to the output by selecting specific input patterns if no other key gates interfere in the sensitization path of the key gate. A similar kind of input pattern can be applied to both the functional IC and the encrypted read list, and the key value can be revealed by observing the output of the two circuits. Logic code based attack aims to minimize the effort of brute force attack by following a divide and conquer strategy to exploit the keys. It checks the number of key gates affecting each of the outputs and target the output with the smallest number of key gates in its input logic code. A brute force attack on an output which is affected by the fewest number of key gates is a feasible solution to extract a subpart of the key. The process iteratively searches for the output with lesser number of key gates and applies a brute force attack on their input logic code to get the entire key set successively. Prevention of these attacks requires satisfying of the following criteria, such as high output corruption for wrong keys, high dependency among the key gates, and there should not be any output that contains only a few key gates. So there have been some consistent effort to address these challenges. Some of the techniques have successfully addressed these challenges separately. However, they generate conflicting key gate locations. So none of them can mitigate all these threats in a single solution. Moreover, all of these schemes fail to prevent the scan-based circuit partitioning attack. So let's see what is scan-based circuit partitioning attack. The scan-based circuit partitioning attack partitions a large circuit into smaller sub-circuits based on the input logic code of each scan cell, which significantly reduces the attack complexity. So to address these challenges imposed by the scan-based circuit partitioning attack, some of the recent work have introduced the concept of external dependency among the key gates. While it is difficult to find mutually dependent key gate locations inside the circuit, this works recommend to insert the key gates at random locations and make them interdependent by embedding an external key generation unit. It takes the primary keys as input and generates highly dependent secondary keys which are actually applied to the circuit. This method can prevent path sensitization, logic code based and scan-based circuit partitioning attack. So this is another architecture of a key generation unit having the capability of generating more unique secondary keys compared to the first one. This method can also prevent the above mentioned attacks. So next I will discuss a method that tries to find optimal key gate locations inside the circuit which cannot be exploited by the attacks that I have discussed so far. So this is a two-step approach. The first step ensures protection against path sensitization and logic code based attack, while the second step ensures high output corruption for wrong keys. Let us take an example. Here, these are the outputs of a circuit and these are the different logic elements. We search the input logic code of each of the output from there and try to find out the largest overlapping input logic code. In this example, G strong is the largest overlapping input logic code. If we insert the key gates in G strong region, then the input logic code of any output of the circuit would contain either all or none of the key gates. Also, all the key gates will be dependent on the remaining key gates. These two properties ensures protection against path sensitization and logic code based attacks. Finally, in step 2, this method relies on a fault analysis guided technique to insert the key gates in the G strong region. So this is the first key gate location based defense techniques that is capable of mitigating all these attacks without generating conflicting key gate locations. However, this method cannot prevent the powerful SAT attack and scan based circuit partitioning attack. So let's see what is the SAT attack. SAT attack is the most predominant attack on logic encryption. This attack uses a SAT based algorithm to extract the keys of a logically encrypted combinational circuit. The attack algorithm iteratively searches for a special set of distinguished input pattern, we call them as DIPs, which help to reduce the key search space by eliminating the incorrect keys. A DIP ensures that at least two different keys produces different outputs. Comparison of the outputs with the output of a functional chip for the same DIP helps to eliminate at least one or both the keys as incorrect keys. The attack shows that using a limited number of DIPs, all the incorrect keys can be eliminated and an equivalent set of correct keys can be revealed. Now let's see how we can prevent the SAT attack. Here I will discuss two different types of SAT resilient solutions. The first one is point function based defense against SAT attack and the second one is scan protection for SAT prevention. First, let's see various point function based SAT resilient techniques. The success of SAT attack largely depends on the ability of the DIPs to eliminate multiple incorrect keys in a single iteration. The execution of SAT attack is nothing but the summation of the number of iterations and the execution time of all these iterations. So one convenient way to mitigate SAT attack is to increase the total number of iterations exponential to the key size. Incorporation of a point function into the obfuscated netlist can exponentially increase the number of DIPs to extract the correct key. Several SAT preventive logic encryption schemes such as SARLock, TTLock, anti-SAT, strict functionality logic logging, etc. have been developed based on the point function guided defense strategy. So let's see a few of them. The SARLock, so first we will discuss the SARLock technique. The SARLock unit comprises of a comparator and a marks block. The comparator generates a flip signal for a specific input pattern for a particular key value. Different key value generates the flip signal for a different input pattern. This flip signal is ZORed with one of the primary outputs, resulting in an incorrect output only for a single input pattern. The marks block prevents the flip signal from corrupting the output for the correct key. However, it has been observed that SARLock is vulnerable to removal attack. So TTLock is a modified version of the SARLock that can prevent the removal attack. So it modifies the design logic code by either inserting or replacing some of the logic gates which produces an inverted output only for a selected input pattern. This input pattern is called as protected input pattern. A restoring unit comprises of a comparator, generates a flip signal which is ZORed with the primary output. The flip signal becomes 1 if and only if the input matches the key. For the correct key, which is the same as the protected input, the additional inversion introduced by TTLock restores the correct functionality. So here in this example, these two designs produce the same output for all inputs except the input 00011. So here 00011 is the protected input as well as the secret key. There are other methods as well, such as anti-SAT, state functionality, logic locking, etc. So in the interest of time, I am not going to the details of those techniques. So over the years, there have been a cat and mouse race between different variations of the SAT attack and the respective countermeasures. State-of-the-art point function based SAT resilient techniques can theoretically prevent the SAT attack by exponentially increasing the attack complexity. However, in the process, they produce very poor output corruption for wrong keys, sometimes only one output bit for only one input pattern. Moreover, a lot of them are vulnerable to various attacks as mentioned in this table. So this observation clearly shows that SAT attack resilient defense are far from getting matured. So we need to think some alternate solutions. One important observation about SAT attack is that it is applicable only on combinational circuits. Since all the practical circuits are sequential in nature, this attack exploits the scan-based DFT infrastructure to convert a sequential circuit to its combinational counterpart and subsequently launch the attack. If we can restrict the controllability and observability of the internal state elements, then a sequential circuit cannot be converted to a form of SAT-solvable Boolean equations. As can be observed from this table, in the absence of scan access, circuit unrolling attack also fails for large sequential circuit due to high resource and computational complexity. Therefore, scan obfuscation can be used as a potential solution against SAT attack. So now I will present you a dynamic scan obfuscation strategy for SAT prevention. So it's a two-step approach. In the first step, it inserts key gates in optimal locations using the method that we discussed before. The second step provides test authentication guided scan access only to the authenticated test engineers. Accessing the scan chains requires a test key, which is same as the secret obfuscation key used to logic lock the circuit. Proper scan access is granted only if the correct test key is applied. A wrong test key dynamically corrupts the scan operation. For this purpose, this method encrypts the scan-enable line of a set of selected scan cells. As shown in this diagram, the scan-enable line of DFFC is encrypted. In scan mode, DFFC gets input from DFFB for each clock cycle only if the test key Tk is equal to the functional key Fk. If they are not equal for any given clock cycle, the content of a random scan cell, here the DFFA, decides whether DFFC receives input from DFFB or its combinational counterpart. If for a given clock cycle DFFA equal to 0, then DFFC gets input from combinational counterpart. If DFFA equal to 1, DFFC equal to DFFB. Since the value of DFFA changes dynamically in each clock cycle, it completely corrupts the scan operation. So this is an example scan chain encrypted using the scheme. As we can see that for a wrong value of the keys, the scan operation gets completely corrupted. As we can see that the initial content of the scan chain and the observed response at the scan output are entirely different, thus offer no observability of the captured response. Similarly, the desired scan in vector also gets corrupted and different vector gets uploaded in the scan chain. So there is no controllability of the scan chains either. So without this controllability and observability of the scan chains, SAT attack cannot succeed. So despite obfuscating the scan operation, this method offers full support for manufacturing, functional and infill testing. To conduct manufacturing test, the potentially untrustworthy third-party foundry requires scan access. Since manufacturing test does not require the chip to be functional, it generates the test pattern for manufacturing test considering a dummy key as the obfuscation key. The same key is shared with the foundry, which they can use to get access to the scan chain and conduct test for structural faults. Once the tested chips return back to the design house, then functional testing is performed in a secured environment using a set of test data generated considering the actual obfuscation key. Infill testing must also be performed by authenticated test engineers who have authorized scan access. This is another obfuscation strategy which is named as encrypt flip-flop, that insert marks key gate in front of the set of selected scan cells. As demonstrated in the figure, depending upon the value of the key, either X or X bar propagates to the next logic level as well as the scan cell. Here we do not require separate obfuscation logic element, separate obfuscation for logic element and the scan chains. In functional mode, encrypt flip-flop obfuscates the design functionality, whereas in scan mode, it obfuscates the scan data. Here is an example of scan obfuscation using encrypt flip-flop scheme. Here also the uploaded scan-in vector is different from the original input vector and the scanned out response is different from the captured response. So no controllability and observability of the internal states. Thus this method can also prevent the SAT attack. We can see test authentication key step can also be augmented with the fundamental encrypt flip-flop scheme as shown in this diagram. The scan access requires applying a test key. If the test key matches the obfuscation key stored in a tamper-proof memory, then the proper scan access is granted. As the dynamic output of a pseudo random number generator acts as the input to the key gate. So this is another relatively lightweight alternative solution. Here for a wrong key that we completely freeze the scan operation, offering zero controllability and observability. Both of these two methods offer full testability support. So, two possible ways to extract the key of a logic locked sequential circuit are either mounting the circuit handling attack or applying the SAT attack after circumventing the sequentiality of the circuit by misusing the scan-based DFT infrastructure. While circuit handling attack suffers from scalability issue, the scan-based DFT infrastructure can be secured by various methods that I have discussed so far. So next I will be presenting a recent work that examines the security of logic locked sequential circuits from a different perspective. It investigates whether it is possible to activate a locked netlist using an approximate correct key. SAT and circuit handling attack tries to find out exact obfuscation key. But can we activate a chip using a key that produces nearly correct output? So is there any real life application where an IC can be used whose output slightly deviates from the correct output? Actually, there exists a wide range of approximate circuits that are very much usable even if they produce small inaccuracy in the output. So this work proposes a particle song optimization guided attack on logic encryption that can find an approximately correct key, which produces minimal error at the output. So this attack can be launched on both combinational and sequential circuits. Sorry, and interestingly, this attack doesn't require scan access. So this is highly scalable attack and can be effective on approximate circuits, which can tolerate a certain amount of error in the output. So what's next? So this is an open problem. We need to find solution to this kind of problem. So one probable solution is to introduce obfuscation at a higher abstraction level, that is the RTL level. FSM obfuscation is an alternative to gate level obfuscation which allows obfuscation at a higher level, as I mentioned. Although FSM obfuscation has not been extensively studied in the literature, there is an enormous potential of RTL obfuscation in offering protection of an IP of a design. Various attacks which are difficult to contain at the gate level netlist obfuscation can be easily nullified by introducing obfuscation at the RTL level. At the same time, a different set of threats emerges at the RTL level obfuscation which must be resolved. Therefore, it is essential to explore various possibilities of FSM obfuscation and perform extensive security analysis against numerous possible attacks to ensure utilization of the RTL level obfuscation to its full potential. So let us discuss a few of the RTL level obfuscation scheme. The first one that I will discuss today is called Harpoon. This method modifies the original FSM with a set of preceding states that form an obfuscation mode, which must be traversed in a correct order to reach the initial state of the original FSM. The traversal order is the designer's secret, without the knowledge of which the FSM enters into a black hole state. As we can see in this figure, the states O0, O1, O5 form the obfuscation mode, while the state S0, S1 to S5 are the states of the original FSM. Although S0 is initial state of the original FSM, the obfuscated FSM starts with the initial state O0. S0 can only be reached by performing correct sequence of state traversal, that is O0 to O2, then O3, then S0, which requires applying the input sequence I0, I2 and I3. This input sequence is called the enabling key. This enabling key is shared only with the authorized users. Unavailability of this enabling key inhibits an attacker from reaching the correct initial state of the FSM, preventing unauthorized use of the IP. So next comes a different variation that is called dynamic state deflection. So this is another FSM obfuscation method which protects each state of the original FSM by preventing unauthorized overwriting of the FSM state memory registry. The baseline concept of this strategy is also same as Harpoon, which consists of preceding obfuscation mode and an enabling key. However, unlike Harpoon, dynamic state deflection strategy authenticates the enabling key for each state transition in a normal mode of the FSM. If the key does not match with the correct enabling key, the FSM enters into a black hole cluster from where there is no return path to the original FSM. Each valid state is associated with a black hole cluster, and each black hole state is dynamically mapped to a unique wrong key. Now I will discuss another similar kind of method that is called interlocking based FSM obfuscation. So similar to Harpoon, this scheme also consists of a obfuscating and normal mode. An obfuscation mode driven by a correct sequence of input has to be traversed before entering the normal mode of the FSM. However, unlike Harpoon, which does not allow entry to the original FSM for any wrong input sequence, a valid state of the original FSM can be reached in interlocking based obfuscation scheme even for a wrong input sequence. Whereas Harpoon doesn't offer any protection once the normal mode is reached, interlocking based strategy protects some of the key state transition of the normal mode based on the correct value of a code word. The value of the code word is neither applied externally not stored in the chip, eliminating the possibility of leakage of the key. Instead, it is integrated into the transition function of the state machine. The code word is generated correctly only if the correct sequence of the states are traversed in the obfuscated mode by applying a correct input sequence. Also, multiple entry points to the normal mode allows a wrong input sequence to reach the normal mode via a different path. However, the generated wrong code word corrupts the state transition of the original FSM. So these are the few methods that I have discussed on FSM obfuscation scheme. So although these methods assume that it is difficult to extract the FSM behavior from the flattened gate level netlist, some recent reverse engineering attacks could successfully break the defense of this scheme. The capability of differentiating the obfuscation mode state transition and the normal mode state transition makes these attacks powerful. So due to the time constraint, a detailed discussion of all these attacks and countermeasures are not possible in this forum. So in this talk, I tried to introduce the importance of securing the IP of a design. I introduced the various possible solutions that are available and finally discuss some of the key logic locking techniques, both gate level and RTL level. We can see neither point function based nor scan based SAT resilient solutions guarantee full protection of the IP of a design. Similarly, RTL level obfuscations are also not fully secure. So you can see every second day you will find some of the new attacks has been proposed which can successfully break so and so logic locking technique. And every day people try to come up with a better solution that can probably offer protection against some of the existing attack. So this brings a lot of opportunity for the new researchers to come into the picture and solve some of the interesting problem in this domain. So in my talk I tried to highlight some of the key development in logic locking in the recent years. I would like to thank all of you for listening to my talk, and if you have any question, please feel free to contact me. I will be happy to answer your questions, and it would be a great pleasure to me if this talk is helpful for some of you. So thank you once again for your kind attention. Thank you very much.